Hey everybody, what's going on everybody? Just some guy here playing Magic the Gathering in the arena as I like to do oh so much. And today I'm playing a deck that's not exactly how I envisioned it would be, but it works out pretty well sometimes nonetheless. It's called Fairy Tale because originally I built it around the card Happily Ever After, which it's a pretty cool enchantment. Let me just make sure I'm looking at not collected cards here. Basically, it does all this. Enters the battlefield, each player gains 5 life and draws one. And then beginning of your upkeep, if you got 5 colors of permanence, 6 or more card types between the battlefield and your graveyard, and you've got at least your starting life total, so at least 20, you win the game. And my original idea was to get that into play, discard a Sphinx of the Guild Pact, which is all colors, into my graveyard, and then have plenty of card types and bring back the Sphinx so that I've got all colors and win. Now, the hardest part about that is the fact that I don't actually have any of these, and with my low rare wildcard count, I didn't really feel like crafting any. So I threw some random 3 mana artifacts in place of Happily Ever After just to see if I could actually get the combo very often, and it worked fairly well, about 50-50. Sometimes I got totally crushed, and other times I got it to work. The problem really for this deck is getting enough life. So I've got life linking blockers that are also pretty formidable blockers just to prevent my opponents from attacking me. Now the worst deck that this deck can play against, other than just a control deck that counters all my combo pieces, is it's gotta I think it's gotta be cycling. All those cycling decks with the Drakuseth Stingers just reduce my life total so quickly that it can be almost impossible to come back. That said, I do have some board wipes and stuff, a little removal to try and keep myself alive. And at the moment, since I don't have Happily Ever After, I've added Dream Trawler, Drakuseth, Maw of Flames, which is a really awesome one in this deck, Vilis, Broker of Blood, Endray's Foreigners, and Godzilla, Primeval Champion to the deck, just because these things are way more exciting to bring back from the graveyard straight into play on turn 5 than Sphinx of the Guild Pact is if you don't have a Happily Ever After in play. So, with that said, let's get into some just easy casual matches and see just how easy they actually are. As you could probably tell looking at the deck list, although this deck symbol seems to think it's a 5-color deck, clearly it's it's Mardu and its heart. Its nearest and dearest colors are red, black, and white because those are the ones that let us draw and ditch and recur things and control our opponents. White was initially in there for Happily Ever After, now it's in there because why not? It's a pretty solid color. If I'm being perfectly honest, this deck could just about be black-red. That would just mean using Extinction Events and extra Storm's Wraths in place of Shatter the Sky. Sacred Foundry will come in tapped for us on turn 1. This hand, not excellent because I don't have a black source, but I do have the ability to cast Cathartic Reunion, getting these Endray's Foreigners right into the graveyard exactly where I want them, and maybe throwing out a Vampire at the same time. Playing against a creature deck, Mori the Collector hanging out over there, well, now I can actually Cathartic Reunion away both of these massive threats with the hope of getting them back in not too many turns from now, although 3 lands off the top not bringing me any closer to achieving those goals. Although it does mean that should I draw something like a Rise from the Grave or any of those other things that bring creatures from my graveyard to the battlefield, I'll have the resources to cast it. In the meantime, opponent gets in for 2 and draws a card. I don't mind these mutate decks just because they focus so much on building up one huge creature with all kinds of crazy abilities that one death-touching blocker can often prevent them from attacking with pretty good success. The creature that mutates and gives one of my creatures -2/-2 until end of turn every time it does so isn't something it can really use right now just because it doesn't have mutate itself, so it would have to be in play for something to mutate onto it, which isn't an issue at the moment. So our opponent just plays Umori himself, passes it back to me, no attack, of course. More land and board wipes coming in off the top here. Not at all what I need right now. Board wipes, actually not bad. Kaya's Wrath gains us a couple life at this point because we have a couple creatures, and it prevents him from drawing any cards as Shatter the Sky would give him that card with his 4-power companion over there. Let's see what our opponent does. And the clock is ticking. Thrilling things down here in the arena. I think I'm going to go grab a snack because this guy sure likes to take his time. Although just this once. He's been playing pretty fast other than that, so that's nice. Wow. Well, okay, so that soaks up both death-touching blockers. And I draw 2 cards. So I think, even though I have a Rise to Glory, I don't want to bring anything back because that would just attack and force me to block. I think right now I just enter, and I don't want to board wipe because I would like to double block this guy as it doesn't have trample. And yikes. Okay, so I'll take 10, but get a couple cards out of it. And this honestly just gives me a lot more to Kaya's Wrath away. So we'll see. Our opponent probably comes in with the team, at least the team that can attack so far. Trade a couple vampires for this board, draw a couple cards, and then plan to... Oh, never mind. Okay, well, in that case, I'm just going to go ahead and Kaya's Wrath. Well, first I'll attack, because if I attack and he doesn't block, then they each gain me 1 life from hitting him, and they survive to get killed to Kaya's Wrath. If he does block, they just gain me 1 life. And if I didn't attack, they would have just gained me 1 life from this. So this way I get 4 life in total this turn. 2 creatures I controlled were in fact destroyed. Gives me a nice, I'll give him a thanks. Little tickle in my throat. Hopefully it's not COVID. Anyway, ditch the Shatter the Sky because at this point he's got 3 cards in hand and I'm hoping spot removal will be plenty. Alright, Footfall Crater, not a bad draw, especially alongside the Blood Crypt. So now I can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get something back. The Blood Crypt casts the Footfall Crater onto the plains, which means I get a hasty Drakuseth, I think. Yeah, so Blood Crypt, pay 2 life, Coglet fights things. I'm not going to have any, well, I guess I will have an enchantment, but that's totally okay. I can actually, if this went into the graveyard early, I could actually bring it back with Rise to Glory. That's the only R in my deck, as this is only a 1 of. Not going to use auto tap here. I do not want to tap my haste giving land just to bring a creature back, because then, well, you know, this whole enchantment is kind of pointless, which means the Blood Crypt costing me 2 life was kind of pointless, and it's just a whole big thing. Anyhow, I'm going to bring back Drakuseth for now, give it haste, or him or her, not really sure. Sounds like a fairly masculine name if I'm being perfectly honest. And Kogla, no reach there, so we are good to come in for 7, just as I suspected. Poke our opponent for 4, so he takes 11 this turn. And go ahead and jab Kogla for 3, just because I can. Not going to finish him or her off, but we'll make this Drakuseth all the sweeter looking. This is one of the best cards to bring back, just because it can potentially clean up your opponent's entire board, and it also just hits your opponent for quite a bit. Hemophage, draining me for a life, getting our opponent 1 life back. He's still just dead to Drakuseth on board though. Comes in for 7, deals 4. Uh-oh. No, I almost killed myself there. And then submit 0, and I will try to hit him with that good game back, just since he sent it to me. And there we go. Get him by Xaxes, thanks to Drakuseth, Maw of Flames, coming back into play way faster. Well, actually not really way faster than turn 7 in the end there, but came into play with haste, which ended up being a pretty big deal. Had I been a turn behind on the attacks, I might have wanted to leave him back as a blocker. Revenge of the Ravens, good old reward. Let's get into one more game at least. I don't want to keep you here for too long. I'm sure you have very important things to do with your time in quarantine, and there are a lot of other Magic the Gathering videos to watch. But I'd like to give you an even better look at the inside of this deck, although it worked pretty perfectly that time. Got some big threats in the yard, brought them back from the yard, and used them to finish off my opponent. Although, I didn't really end up casting anything outside of my colors, which is always fun to do. This hand I will keep. Thrill of Possibility is something I can play to try and find more lands. I've got Kaya's Wrath in case my opponent gets out of hand. And since I'm on the draw, I might top deck a Swamp for a turn 1 Vampire. Probably not, though. Instead, I drew another Vampire, so definitely not. Alright, couple Unbreakable Bonds, so if I do happen to find anything good to throw into the yard, I can get it right back, well, right back a couple turns later, hopefully fast enough to win the game anyhow. Opponent, maybe is it spells? Not entirely sure what they are rocking over there. Given that I've got the board wipe, I think I'll just ditch the Mortify. I'm not sure if he's planning on cranking out any kind of tokens by drawing multiple cards, or by any other means for that matter. But start out with this Thrill. Not sure what he's thinking. Maybe he's going to opt in response. Wants to shock my dome. Whatever it is. Yep, there's the opt. Not sure why that was such a big decision for him. I mean, shocking my face when I'm at 20 life doesn't really do a whole lot, and I feel like opt's the only other thing that he possibly could have had to cast. Anyhow, Sacred Foundry, not the colors I wanted, and a Sphinx, something I much rather would have discarded as opposed to drawing, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Opponent with a couple untapped lands of a couple colors is thinking yet again. Deep in the tank finally comes out with a mountain. Let's see if there's a creature that follows. Radical Idea to draw yet another card for our opponent, and passes turn back to me. This not looking excellent. This is something this deck also does upon occasion, although less frequently than would be a major problem. The Royal Scions makes a lot of good sense. Presumably has, what is it, Riel, where whenever you ditch a card for the first time, you also draw that many cards. Opponent may be searching for an Ominous Seize. I wouldn't be surprised to see one of those pop up. In the meantime, get one of my vampires down. Might either shock or not. At any rate, if it does, I've got another one to cast. Opponent looking at the Royal Scions. Maybe gonna re-Radical Idea. 5 cards in hand though, I'm sure they can find something to do just from their hand. Dorat, the Perfect Pet, coming on in before he casts any instant and sorceries. Ogre Breath 5/5/5. Checking out his own Dorat, making sure he knows what makes it bigger, or targeting it with the Royal Scions. Will it get even bigger before it goes to combat? I doubt that it won't. Given that he's got that Radical Idea, he seems to really be itching to cast. Cathartic Reunion instead, ditching another Cathartic Reunion and a land. That's fun. Not many people play that card. I, of course, do. Anyhow, Blood Crypt. So no, I see no reason to pay 2 life, so enters tapped. Another Vampire. I'll go ahead and poke the Royal Scions just a little bit so that they don't end up at 8 loyalty too fast. And ship it back to my opponent automatically because I ran out of things to do. 5 mana now for our opponent. And still looking at the Radical Idea. Opts for another card. Cathartic Reunion though. Dorat now a 3/3 on its own. The Royal Scions ready to make it a 5/3, I'm sure. There's the Ominous Seize. Shame our opponent already spent a couple Cathartic Reunions and ditched another one. That's alright. I'm sure they'll find a Thrill of Possibility or something to keep on ticking up that Ominous Seize. Looking for a giant 8/8 Kraken. Now, if I had a Mortify at the moment, that wouldn't be all that bad because I could take that out before it gets scary at all. But at the same time, these guys block 8/8s pretty effectively, I've heard. And Kaya's Wrath will certainly do the trick, although it's sorcery speed. Dorat gets in for 4. What a perfect pet he is, as I am now down to 13. Another Kaya's Wrath off the top. Not really what I was hoping to draw, but I'll just go ahead, jump right to combat, and come at the Royal Scions for a couple. And that is if my opponent will let me. Attackers have been declared. That's step 1. Let's see if he interferes before damage is done. Nope. Royal Scions down to 5. doing a pretty good job of keeping them from ultimating, which is good because the 4 cards they would draw would really accelerate this bad boy over here. That Kraken would come to the surface a little faster than I'd appreciate at that point, and so I think it is entirely worth it for me to just focus on getting the Royal Scions out of here. Crackling Drake draws another card, another Ominous Ease counter, and what is it that I want to do next turn, knowing that? Well, it's getting better and better, or at least looking better and better, these Kaya's Wraths over here. I think I might fire one of those off. I'll come in at the Royal Scions first. Doubt that he blocks. It'll at least tick their loyalty down a tiny bit more, but this clock my opponent's building up is ticking faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. Like that episode of Futurama, where, they steal some chronotons and then time keeps on slipping forward and eventually it's like 3 months in the future or something in just a couple days. If you haven't checked out Futurama, specifically that episode, highly recommend watching it. Anyway, 6th land for us. Not quite enough for a Sphinx of the Guild Pact. I think it's time to attack the Royal Scions yet again. See if our opponent stops any of this damage this time.